In 1970, Margaret looked at me very sadly after her mother's funeral. She said, "Please promise you won't send me away to die like that if I get Alzheimer's." We saw her mother, who'd had Alzheimer's for several years, a week before she died, in a ghastly mental hospital where she'd been sent after her husband wasn't able to manage any longer at home. Her lovely curly hair had been cut very short. Many patients in the ward were partially dressed, shouting and pleading for help. After seeing her mother's deterioration, from being a wonderful, lively, bright-eyed, caring lady, Margaret often spoke about her own fear of Alzheimer's, and she had nightmares as well, as I know only too well. In 1998, 28 years later, my lovely wife showed the first signs. Early in 2001, she too was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I'm Tom, I'm 81, I've cared for Margaret at home for 13 years. It's not the retirement with fun and travel we'd both hoped for, but I've found some compensation. This is about my experience of long-term care at home. My personal strategy from the early days 13 years ago has been to separate her care, which is my 24/7 job, from the sustained grief that underlies all my emotions. So far, I've kept the promise I made to Margaret 41 years ago. Since 2004, over 150 visiting carers have looked after her personal care. These carers have been my main social contact for many, many years. They keep me cheerful. The perks of this, which is my fourth profession, include regular visits by beautiful girls in uniform. Last year, we moved to Bromley in Kent. Our visiting carers here are excellent girls from Shore Care, and they come from many different countries, and I've learned a lot from them. We have regular visits from a community matron, and also from a highly spectacular, tall, blonde, voluptuous nurse who wears a very short skirt. She gives me a hug and then takes my blood pressure, which is usually rather high. So coping with what? As a professional engineer, I'm a tactile, hands-on person. I'm not afraid of involvement in the shirt sleeves and rubber gloves stuff. We engineers like to see problems as challenges, and sometimes we even invent solutions. Earlier, for example, on my own, there was a lot of handling as Margaret's ability for purposeful movement faded, and there was toileting and washing as she lost control of her bowel actions. Fortunately, nowadays, our visiting carers look after most of her personal care, but every day is wash day, and there's still hand feeding, which takes me 2 or 3 hours every day. And there's handling too, as I adjust her position in bed or on her reclining chair. All these tasks were increasingly difficult as Margaret's personality changed. For being a happy, feisty, fun-loving girl, an ex-Wren, always a joy to be with, always laughter, always humour, always taking the mickey and pulling my leg, she changed into a hostile, argumentative person. Margaret often tried to escape from the house, searching for her mother. She didn't know who I was, but accused me of murdering her mum. I just about coped with all this, but the most difficult part of the package was cutting her toenails. Finding a chiropodist was the first job that I subcontracted. I first insured against the risk of being sued by a chiropodist with a broken jaw. But my worst problem is loneliness. I miss terribly our lovely chatter together. It's 10 years since I had any meaningful conversation with Margaret. One nurse said I had carers syndrome, which is a tendency to run to the gate and drag in the first passerby just for a quick chat. How do I and many others cope? Firstly, always keeping busy, so there's no time to feel sad. It's like a bereavement. The person I knew has gone forever, but after 56 years, I can't stop loving the new, incapable, incontinent, incoherent, immobile Margaret, who sleeps for 22 or 23 hours every day. I make sure that she's clean and comfortable, warm and well-fed. Margaret still enjoys her food. Food comes first was always her motto. I've learned a lot from carers and nurses and doctors, but sometimes, living as I do at the coalface, I have to explain the effects and management of Alzheimer's to the health professionals. So how am I after 13 years of care? I grieve for some part of every day, but I feel fulfillment because so far I've managed to cope. I keep active, there's always something to do, the adrenaline keeps on churning round. Finally, I wonder if government realises how much we unpaid family carers save the country. Without us, care homes and hospitals would overflow. The cost would bankrupt the NHS and the country. What might help? Sometimes we need a rest. We have to keep going, 24/7, day after day, week after week, year after year. This year, I had a 5-day break, which was my first holiday in 12 years. We see on TV how other people have holidays, but this is impossible for many family carers. One serious problem is paying for extra care in the home. A few years ago, there was a government scheme called Take a Break, but the money wasn't ring-fenced. It disappeared. This scheme should be reintroduced with proper safeguards to make sure that family carers actually benefit. I've talked about separating the job from the emotions, and it had been my intention at this point to turn directly to the Minister, but I don't think he's arrived. He has? I beg your pardon, sir. You're there. That makes it easier. I can look at you directly. I don't have to turn round. Minister, I ask you and all the healthcare professionals here today to direct both your jobs and your emotions towards caring for the vast army of family carers. We depend on your support, Minister, and please never forget, sir, that you depend on us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.